One the day I accidentally tied a double knot that refused to come off. You would think that tying your shoelaces is one of the simplest skills in human history. Right after learning how to chew without choking and before figuring out how to ride a bike, you master the art of tying your shoes. At least that is what I thought until one fateful morning when I managed to sabotage myself with a knot so legendary that even the gods of footwear were probably laughing at me. It all started on a Monday, which already had bad vibes. Mondays are cursed. They are the days when your alarm clock sounds extra rude, when your breakfast tastes like cardboard, and when your brain is still buffering from the weekend. I was running late for school, which was nothing new, but this time the universe decided to spice things up. I grabbed my sneakers, shoved my feet inside, and in my panic, I tied my shoelaces with the speed of a Formula One pit crew. I yanked the loops tight, and without realizing it, I created a double knot so fierce it might as well have been forged by dwarves in a fantasy novel. At first, I did not notice. I sprinted out the door, half chewing a piece of bread, half yelling goodbye to my mom. Everything seemed fine until the middle of first period, when my foot started to feel like it was trapped in a medieval torture device. I bent down under the desk to casually loosen the lace, expecting a quick fix, but the knot just stared back at me like a villain in a superhero movie. I pulled at it once. Nothing. I pulled again harder. Still nothing. The knot laughed at me in silence. Panic started to set in. I whispered to myself, "Please do not let me be that kid who gets stuck in a shoe for the entire day." I tugged, twisted, and even tried to use my pencil to poke it open. Instead of loosening, the knot tightened. By the time the teacher asked me a question, I was sweating more from the shoelace battle than from the actual math problem. When lunch came around, I thought I would finally get help. My best friend Max noticed me struggling under the cafeteria table. "Dude, what are you doing?" he asked while shoving fries into his mouth. I explained the situation, expecting sympathy, but he burst out laughing so loud that ketchup squirted onto his shirt. "That is not just a knot," he said between gasps. "That is your destiny now." I glared at him and told him to help. He tried pulling too, but somehow he made it even worse. Now my shoe looked like it was about to explode. The rest of the afternoon turned into a comedy show. Every person I met had a different piece of advice. One girl suggested spitting on the knot because saliva is slippery. Another kid said to rub butter on it, which was a problem because who carries butter in their backpack? A teacher told me to just cut the lace and be done with it. But I refused because those sneakers were brand new, and my mom would have turned into a dragon if I ruined them on day one. By the end of the school day, I was limping like a pirate with a wooden leg. On the bus ride home, people kept asking why I was walking funny. I gave them dramatic answers like I fought a bear or I survived quicksand, because saying I lost a battle to my own shoelace was too embarrassing. When I finally got home, I threw myself onto the living room carpet and announced my defeat. Mom raised an eyebrow and asked why I was crawling instead of walking. I showed her the knot. She squinted at it like a scientist examining a rare specimen. She tugged once and said, "Wow, you really messed up." Then she tried pulling at different angles, twisting, and even using a fork from the kitchen, but nothing worked. At that point, I started imagining my future. Would I have to sleep in these shoes forever? Would they become part of my identity? Would people call me the kid with the eternal knot? I pictured myself giving a TED Talk in the future, titled, "How One Double Knot Changed My Life." Mom, being the genius she is, decided to turn the whole disaster into a teaching moment. She said sometimes in life we tie knots we cannot undo, but with patience and persistence we can figure it out. I stared at her like, "Mom, this is not philosophy class, this is my foot." Still, I appreciated the drama. The funniest part was when my little sister tried to help. She brought her toy doctor kit and pretended she was performing shoelace surgery. She tapped my shoe with a plastic stethoscope and declared we need to operate immediately. She handed me a toy syringe and said this might hurt a little. I could not stop laughing even though my foot was still trapped. By dinner time, the entire family had taken turns trying. Dad used pliers, my sister used tweezers, and my grandma even suggested soaking the shoe in warm water while chanting an old family rhyme. I sat there thinking I was starring in some weird reality show called Knotbusters. Finally, after hours of chaos, the knot loosened just enough for me to pull it apart. The moment it came free, everyone in the room cheered like we had just won the World Cup. I raised the lace above my head like a trophy. My foot was free at last. That night, as I lay in bed barefoot for the first time all day, I realized something. The knot was annoying, frustrating, and ridiculous, but it also gave me one of the funniest days of my life. It turned a boring Monday into a story I would never forget. And honestly, that is the kind of humor Gen Z thrives on. We take small disasters and turn them into memes, and sometimes those memes become the highlight of the week. So the moral of the story is simple. Never underestimate the chaos that a double knot can cause. And if you ever find yourself stuck like I was, just remember that at least it will make a great story later. Shoe tying showdown with a classmate. Let me tell you about the day my entire school life almost flipped upside down over something so tiny that even ants would laugh at us. You would never guess that a shoelace could become the center of chaos and glory in a classroom where algebra problems were supposed to be the only battlefield. Yet somehow that is exactly what happened. If you stay with me until the end, you will understand how an innocent challenge about tying shoes turned into the most ridiculous showdown of the year. The morning started normal enough. Birds outside the window were being noisy, like they were auditioning for a TikTok remix. Students dragged themselves into class like zombies, carrying heavy backpacks filled with regrets and half-finished homework. I had just settled into my chair when I noticed that one of my sneakers looked like it had gone through a breakup with its lace. The left shoe was tied neatly while the right one had its laces flopping around like spaghetti noodles. I bent down to fix it, but before I could finish the knot, a voice cut through the air. "Bro, you tie shoes like a grandpa." I looked up. Of course it was Jason. Every class has a Jason. He is the type who thinks he is the main character of the universe. The type who does that fake little cough whenever he wants attention. He sat 2 desks away and had his sneakers up on the chair like he was posing for a streetwear commercial. His laces were tied so cleanly they could have been done by a robot. I raised an eyebrow and said, "At least my shoes do not look like they were tied by Siri with a bad Wi-Fi connection." The class chuckled. Jason smirked and leaned back. "Bet you can't tie faster than me. I am the Usain Bolt of shoelaces." Now let me pause for a second. There are many challenges you can ignore in life. If someone challenges you to eat 10 raw onions, you can walk away. If someone challenges you to jump into a lake during winter, you can decline. But if someone challenges your shoelace tying skills in front of 30 classmates while you are mid-knot, you simply cannot back down. It is a matter of honor, so I said, "Fine, let's settle this. Right here, right now." A shoelace showdown. Gasps spread around the classroom. Our teacher had not arrived yet, which meant the room had transformed into the Wild West. Students gathered around like we were about to stream an epic boxing match. Phones were pulled out. Bets were whispered. Someone even hummed dramatic background music like this was a final boss fight. The rules were simple. We both had to untie our shoes completely. On the count of 3, we would tie them back up. Whoever finished first with a double knot would be the champion. The loser would face eternal shame and probably become the subject of endless memes in the class group chat. I rolled my shoulders like an athlete preparing for the Olympics. Jason cracked his knuckles in an unnecessarily dramatic way. A countdown began. 3, 2, 1. We both lunged down. My fingers moved fast like I had trained all my life for this one moment. Loop, swoop, pull tight. Meanwhile, Jason was speed tying like his sneakers owed him money. The crowd screamed instructions that made no sense. Do a bunny ear. No, the other bunny ear. Bro, cross it faster. Someone even yelled, use the force. Within seconds, I was almost done, but then disaster struck. My lace got tangled in a weird knot that looked like spaghetti meeting headphones in a pocket. Jason was already finishing his loop. He raised his hands in victory while my fingers struggled. But then my brain activated what I like to call the emergency hack mode. Instead of panicking, I yanked the lace loose in one smooth motion and tied the cleanest double knot you have ever seen in your life. I slammed my shoe down on the desk like Thor's hammer at the exact same time Jason shouted, "Done!" The class went silent. Everyone leaned forward to inspect. Both knots were solid. Both were finished at nearly the same second. No one could decide who was faster. Then came the unexpected twist. Jason's knot started to slip loose. His double knot was actually a fake double. The crowd gasped like they had just witnessed a plot twist in a Netflix drama. Meanwhile, my knot sat there strong and proud like a monument of victory. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner, someone announced dramatically. The class erupted in cheers. Jason slumped back in his chair, pretending not to care, but I could see the smoke coming out of his ears. I thought the story would end there, but oh no. The legend of the shoelace showdown began to grow. By lunch, the whole school had heard about it. Freshmen whispered about the epic duel. Seniors gave me high fives in the hallway. Even the janitor nodded at me with respect. Of course, Jason could not let it go. He challenged me to rematches in the cafeteria, in the gym, even during fire drills. Each time I defended my title with the grace of a shoelace ninja. Soon I was no longer just a student. I was the reigning champion of shoe tying. Things escalated. A club was formed called the Lace Racers. Members would gather after school to practice speed tying. We had tournaments with brackets and everything. Someone even designed a logo featuring crossed shoelaces like swords. I wish I was joking, but this actually happened. Our teacher eventually found out. Instead of shutting it down, she secretly became our coach. Apparently, she had once tied shoes at summer camp so fast that kids called her lightning fingers. She trained us in advanced techniques like the double back loop and the one-hand tie. Under her guidance, the club became unstoppable. We even had a rival school challenge us after hearing rumors online. They showed up wearing the fanciest sneakers with rainbow laces and cocky attitudes. The showdown was set in the gym with the whole school watching. Jason and I stood side by side representing our class. For once, we were teammates instead of enemies. The final round was intense. Laces flew like whips. Knots snapped into place with precision. Sweat dripped from brows. Time slowed down. And in the end, we tied so perfectly that the judges declared a tie. Both schools erupted in cheers. Peace was declared. Jason and I looked at each other. Maybe we would never be best friends, but in that moment, we shared mutual respect. He said, "Not bad, Grandpa." I replied, "You too, Siri." We laughed. From that day forward, shoelaces were never just shoelaces. They were a symbol of skill, pride, and unity. Every time I bend down to tie my shoes, I remember the crazy journey that started with one loose lace in math class. So if anyone ever tells you tying shoes is boring, just show them my story. Because sometimes the smallest things lead to the biggest adventures. 3 tying shoes for the doll. Before tying for myself, let me spill the tea on something you probably never thought about. Imagine a classroom full of kids who are half awake, a teacher who runs on pure caffeine, and me sitting at my desk fighting with my shoelaces like they were rebellious noodles. But before I could even touch my sneakers, I made a choice that would change the vibe of the whole day. I decided to tie the shoes of my doll first. Yes, you heard that right, a doll. Sitting on my desk like it owned the place, wearing tiny plastic sneakers that could barely fit a grape. Now before you roll your eyes and say, why would anyone prioritize a doll's shoes over their own? Just hear me out. Sometimes in life you need to send a message. And my message was this. If I can make sure my doll looks sharp and ready, then obviously I can take care of myself after. Call it loyalty, call it comedy, call it complete chaos, but that is how it all began. The moment I reached for the doll's shoes, the entire class noticed. It is impossible to do something even slightly weird in school without 30 pairs of eyeballs locking onto you like surveillance cameras. Jason, the class clown who thinks every moment is his personal stage, shouted, "Bro is babysitting Barbie before saving his own feet." The class erupted with laughter. I smiled like a mastermind because little did they know this was only the opening scene of my saga. As I carefully tied the doll's laces, making perfect little bunny ear loops, students leaned closer like they were watching a live tutorial. Some even whispered to each other like this was a top-secret ritual. A girl named Mia said, honestly, the doll's shoes are neater than his. I pretended not to hear, but inside my brain was clapping back with comebacks like, at least the doll is not walking around with untied Crocs. Finally, the doll stood, tall on my desk with its perfect sneakers, while my own shoes still flapped open like bored mouths. Jason smirked and said, "Bet you cannot tie yours as clean as you tied the doll's." He really had to poke the bear. The challenge was on, but here is the plot twist. Every time I bent down to tie my own shoes, the doll tipped over dramatically like it was fainting. I swear it was possessed or maybe just had balance issues, but the class treated it like destiny. "You have to fix your doll first," someone yelled. Another said, "Your doll is your coach. Respect the coach." And so I found myself retying the doll's laces again and again while my shoes remained abandoned. By now, a crowd had formed. Phones were out recording. Someone added background beats from their phone to make it sound like an epic showdown. My teacher walked in mid-scene, froze, and instead of stopping us, just crossed her arms with the patience of someone who had seen weirder things on field trips. Jason could not resist escalating. He grabbed his own action figure from his bag, yes, apparently he carried one, and slammed it onto the desk. "My guy's sneakers are fresher than your doll's. Let's settle this with a doll shoe tying contest." The room gasped like we were entering the finals of a world championship. The rules formed instantly. We each had to tie our doll's shoes perfectly and then tie our own shoes. Whoever finished first would be crowned the shoe supreme. The loser would face eternal roasting in the group chat. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1, go. My fingers zoomed like they had trained on a PlayStation controller. Loop, swoop, tighten. Meanwhile, Jason's action figure had stubborn Velcro instead of real laces, which the crowd booed as cheating. He tried to explain that Velcro counts as modern innovation, but nobody was buying it. I finished the doll first and raised it high like Simba in The Lion King. Cheers erupted. Then I bent to tie my own sneakers, heart pounding, sweat dripping. Just as I tightened the final knot, Jason tripped over his own chair, and his Velcro shoe flew off dramatically. The class exploded in laughter so loud it could have been mistaken for a concert. From that moment, I was no longer just another student. I was the legend who tied the doll before myself and still won. People started calling me Lace Master. They asked me for lessons in double knots. Some even brought their dolls to school for me to bless with my shoelace magic. Of course, the story spread. By lunch, the entire cafeteria knew about the duel. Someone posted a clip on social media with the caption, "Dude ties doll before himself and still wins life." It got more likes than the principal's official announcements ever did. Even kids from other classes came up to me asking if I could host a workshop. I told them my fees were pizza slices and chocolate milk. Jason did not give up, though. He challenged me again during recess, this time saying we had to tie blindfolded. Imagine 30 kids in a circle chanting like a cult while 2 people tried to tie tiny shoes with socks over their eyes. I ended up tying the doll's shoe backwards, but it still looked stylish, which the crowd declared acceptable. Jason's Velcro betrayed him once again and ripped loudly in failure. Eventually, a full-on doll shoe league formed. Students ranked each other on speed and style. We had scoreboards. We had theme songs. We even had a referee who wore sunglasses indoors just to look official. Tying doll shoes became the hottest extracurricular activity in school. Parents had no idea why their kids suddenly asked for dolls as study partners. My teacher secretly supported us. She whispered one day, "If you can tie those tiny laces, your handwriting will improve too." She was not wrong. My penmanship went from chicken scratches to Instagram calligraphy because my fingers were basically doing workouts every day. One afternoon, the principal finally caught us mid-competition. He looked furious at first, but when he saw the precision of my knot on the doll, he froze, adjusted his glasses, and muttered, "That is cleaner than my own tie." Instead of punishing us, he introduced a new category for the annual talent show, creative shoelace skills. Guess who headlined that event? On talent show night, the auditorium was packed. I walked on stage with my doll like a celebrity bringing a sidekick. The crowd cheered before I even tied anything. With music blasting, I performed the ultimate routine, tying the doll's shoes in sync with my own like a dance battle. The finale was me flipping both shoes in the air and catching them already tied. People lost their minds. Parents stood up. The janitor cried. After that night, the legend was permanent. Anytime someone saw me tie my own shoes first, they gasped and said, "No way you forgot your doll." And yes, sometimes I still tied the doll first, just to keep the myth alive. Looking back, it is hilarious how one small decision became a huge adventure. Choosing to tie the doll's shoes before mine taught me that sometimes the weirdest choices lead to the funniest stories. Also, it taught me that Velcro is unreliable and Jason needs to chill. So the next time you see a doll with untied laces, remember this story. Because who knows, maybe tying its shoes first will make you the unexpected hero of your own classroom legend. 4. Tying shoes backwards. Left and right, you will not believe what happened the day I decided to tie my shoes backwards. I mean literally backwards, left lace on the right shoe and right lace on the left shoe. The whole thing sounds like nonsense, but trust me, it turned into the wildest adventure my classroom had ever seen. Before I explain how the chaos started, let me just say that if you ever want instant attention from 30 bored teenagers, just walk in with your shoelaces swapped. Heads will turn, whispers will spread, and within 5 minutes, you will either be called a genius or a menace to society. It all began on a Monday morning when I was half awake and running late. My brain was operating on 3% battery life, the same level you get when your phone starts begging for a charger. I grabbed my sneakers, threw them on, and without even realizing it, tied the left lace on the right shoe and the right lace on the left shoe. When I finally looked down, I froze. My shoes looked like they had just broken up with reality. The bows were pointing inward, the loops were twisted like pretzels, and the whole thing screamed fashion disaster. Normally, a sane person would fix it immediately. But I am not always sane before breakfast. Instead, I thought, what if I just roll with it? What if I walk into class like this and see what happens? Maybe nobody will notice. Spoiler alert, everybody noticed. The moment I walked in, Jason, the unofficial roast master of the class, shouted, "Yo, why do your shoes look like they are trying to kiss each other?" The whole room erupted with laughter. Even the quiet kid in the corner who never laughs at anything started chuckling like he just discovered memes for the first time. I shrugged and said, "It is a new style. Backwards lace drip. You would not understand." Instead of dying down, the attention only grew. Students left their seats just to get a closer look. Phones came out to record videos. Someone even started live streaming my shoes like they were rare animals in a zoo. A girl asked if I had done it on purpose as a form of artistic expression. Another said it looked like an optical illusion that could go viral on TikTok. I realized then that my accidental mistake had turned into a full-blown performance. Jason could not let me have the spotlight. He stood up, pointed dramatically, and declared, "If you are going to rock the backwards look, then prove it. Tie them again in front of us, but backwards on purpose this time." The class gasped like he had just announced the start of the Hunger Games. My reputation was on the line. I sat down, untied the laces, and prepared for the challenge. Fingers ready, heart pounding, I crossed the left lace to the right shoe and the right lace to the left shoe. Everyone leaned in as if I were about to defuse a bomb. The knots formed slowly, awkwardly, twisting in ways knots were never meant to twist. Finally, I pulled tight and raised my feet. Both shoes were tied backwards perfectly, bows facing inward like two antennas trying to talk to each other. The class exploded in cheers. Someone yelled, "No way! This guy just invented reverse fashion." From that moment forward, I was no longer just a student. I was the backwards lace icon. People came to me for tutorials on how to tie their shoes the wrong way. They asked for autographs on their sneakers. They wanted pictures of their shoes next to mine. It was insane. Of course, Jason refused to accept defeat. The next day, he showed up with his shoes tied diagonally. Instead of left over right, he crossed them corner to corner. It looked like his sneakers had gone through a tornado. He called it the crisscross flex. The class voted and declared my backwards style cooler, but Jason kept trying. He did upside-down knots, sideways knots, and once even glued his laces together, claiming it was innovation. Nothing beat the original backwards drip. Soon the whole school knew about it. By the end of the week, nearly half the students were experimenting with their shoelaces. Hallways looked like fashion runways gone wrong. Some kids tripped constantly because their knots were so complicated. Teachers were confused, but instead of banning it, one of them secretly joined in. Our history teacher showed up one morning with his loafers tied backwards and winked at me, like we were in on a secret society. Things got out of control when the principal heard rumors about shoe anarchy spreading across campus. He called me into his office. I thought I was about to be suspended for crimes against footwear. But instead, he leaned forward, adjusted his glasses, and whispered, "Show me how you did it." 10 minutes later, the principal walked out proudly with his own shoes tied backwards. Teachers gasped, students cheered, and my legend became official. That should have been the end of the story, but Jason was still salty. He challenged me to a shoelace showdown during the school assembly. The rules were simple. We would each tie our shoes backwards on stage in front of the entire student body. The fastest and neatest knot would win. The loser would have to wear slippers for a week. The assembly was packed. Over 400 kids chanting, "Tie, tie, tie." The lights dimmed, music played, and we stepped on stage like gladiators. My heart was racing, but my fingers were calm. Years of playing video games had prepared me for fast finger work. At the signal, we both lunged down. Lace left to shoe right, lace right to shoe left. Loops twisting, bows forming, tension rising. The crowd roared as if they were watching a championship game. I finished first with a flawless double knot that looked like modern art. Jason struggled, his knot slipping apart like overcooked noodles. When I stood and raised my shoes, the place went wild. The principal held up my arm like a boxing referee declaring me champion. Jason dramatically fell to the floor as if he had been defeated in battle. From that day forward, backwards shoe tying was no longer just a weird mistake. It became a movement. We had clubs, tournaments, even merchandise. People wore t-shirts that said, "Backwards is the new forwards." Local news showed up to cover the phenomenon. Reporters asked me deep questions like, "What does tying backwards say about the future of youth culture?" I answered with a straight face, "It means nothing is impossible if you believe in your laces." My parents were confused but supportive. My mom said, "At least you are finally famous for something that is not eating an entire pizza." Alone? My dad shook his head but secretly tried the backwards method when no one was looking, months. Later, our school hosted a regional talent show. Everyone expected singers, dancers, and magicians. But when I stepped on stage with my sneakers, the audience already knew what was coming. I performed a routine where I tied one shoe backwards while blindfolded and the other while juggling a basketball. The crowd went insane. Judges gave me standing ovations. I walked away with first prize and the title of Backwards Lace King. Even now, when I look back, I cannot believe how one sleepy morning mistake turned into all this. It started with me rushing out the door and ended with a movement that made everyone laugh, cheer, and question their footwear choices. Sometimes the best stories come from the weirdest accidents. So if you ever find yourself tying your shoes the wrong way, do not panic. Lean into it. Maybe your mistake will turn into your legend, just like mine. 5 tying shoes. Then lifting my foot to show the whole family. You ever have one of those moments where you do something so small, so random, so ridiculously ordinary, and suddenly it becomes the most dramatic performance of your life? That was me on the day I tied my shoes in the living room and decided to lift my foot like it was a trophy for the entire family to see. You might think that tying shoelaces is basic human survival skill number 1. But in my house, it became a full-scale event with commentary, applause, and yes, unnecessary drama. The story begins on a Saturday morning. The air smelled like pancakes. My little brother was glued to cartoons, and my dad was already complaining about yard work. I sat on the couch with my sneakers staring at me from the floor. Normally, nobody cares about shoes in our house. But for some reason, I felt like today was the day I would show the family my true shoelace power. Maybe it was the syrup sugar rush. Maybe it was the fact that my shoes had been mocking me all week with their floppy, untied laces. Whatever the reason, I bent down, cracked my knuckles like a pro athlete, and whispered to myself, "Let's make history." Now, in my defense, I tied those laces flawlessly. The loops were even, the knot was tight but not too tight, and the bow stood up like it was ready for a magazine cover. It was art. It was engineering. It was destiny. And when I finished, I did not just stand up like a normal person. No. I raised my foot high in the air like Simba from The Lion King, presenting my tied shoe to the entire living room. "Behold," I announced dramatically, "the perfect knot." At first, my family froze. My mom stopped flipping pancakes midair. My dad's newspaper slid out of his hands. My brother's cartoon show went completely ignored. They all stared at my shoe like I had just summoned lightning from the ceiling. Then the commentary began. My dad squinted and said, "You want applause for tying your shoe? Son, that is like asking for a medal for breathing. My mom, however, gasped and said, "Actually, that bow is symmetrical. Look at those loops. I could use that skill for gift wrapping." Meanwhile, my little brother laughed so hard he spilled orange juice on the carpet and shouted, "Show the other foot, too." Prove it was not luck. So, of course, I tied the other shoe and lifted that one like a champion as well. Now both my feet were up in the air while I balanced dangerously on the couch. The family had no choice but to clap, because at this point I looked like a gymnast finishing a routine. Even the dog barked like it was part of the audience. From then on, the living room transformed into my personal stage. Every time I tied my shoes, I felt obligated to present them to the family. Breakfast time, lunch time, before going out, after coming home, shoe tying was no longer a task, it was a performance. My dad rolled his eyes daily but secretly checked his own laces after watching me. My mom gave me scores out of 10. My brother tried copying me, but his bows looked like spaghetti knots, and he tripped 3 times just walking to the kitchen. One afternoon, we had relatives visiting. My aunt and uncle were sitting on the sofa sipping tea when I walked in wearing sneakers. Everyone was chatting peacefully until I suddenly shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to witness shoelace history." I lifted my foot high and showed off my bow like a peacock showing its feathers. The room fell silent, then erupted into confused laughter. My uncle whispered, "Is this a new family tradition?" My aunt actually pulled out her phone and recorded me like I was auditioning for a talent show. Things escalated fast. Word spread that I was the shoelace show-off of the family. Cousins started challenging me at reunions. One said he could tie his shoes blindfolded. Another said she could do it faster with one hand. Suddenly, shoe tying competitions became a normal part of our holiday gatherings. Forget board games or karaoke. Our entertainment was feet in the air, knots on display, and dramatic applause after each attempt. My grandpa, who usually just tells long war stories, even got involved. He claimed he could tie boots in complete darkness thanks to army training. We dared him to prove it. He disappeared into a closet, came out 5 minutes later, and his boots were perfectly tied. The crowd went wild. I bowed respectfully. It was the only time I admitted defeat. Grandpa officially became the shoelace legend of our bloodline, but of course, I was not done. I needed to reclaim my crown. So I began practicing new techniques. Double knots, triple knots, decorative bows shaped like flowers. I even watched YouTube tutorials on advanced lacing patterns. Soon I was not only showing my shoes to my family, but teaching them shoelace artistry. My mom requested special bows for holidays. My brother begged me to tie his sneakers before basketball games because he thought it would give him superpowers. Then came the fateful family barbecue. Everyone was outside, burgers sizzling, kids running around. When my cousin shouted, "Do the shoe trick!" the crowd gathered. I sat on the porch, tied my sneakers with maximum style, and lifted my foot to the sky like I was raising a championship trophy. People cheered, clapped, and some even filmed. But then disaster struck. My chair tipped backward. I flailed like a cartoon character and landed flat on my back, still holding my foot in the air. The crowd gasped, then burst into uncontrollable laughter. Even I laughed because honestly, the fall was the grandest finale I could have delivered. After that day, my legend only grew. Family members started introducing me at events as the shoelace guy. At weddings, people asked me to tie the bride's shoes for good luck. At birthday parties, kids lined up for lace lessons. Once, at Thanksgiving, my uncle asked me to demonstrate my skill at the dinner table. I tied a bow on a turkey leg just to make everyone laugh. Looking back, I realized the entire saga started with something tiny. I tied my shoe and lifted it proudly. Instead of being normal, I turned it into a performance. My family thought it was ridiculous but also hilarious. And in the end, it gave us memories we still laugh about. So if you ever feel like your shoelaces are boring, remember my story. Tie them with style, raise your foot with confidence, and maybe you too will turn a simple knot into a legendary family tradition. Because sometimes life is not about the big things. Sometimes it is about showing off your shoes at breakfast and making everyone clap for no reason at all.